With plenty of players still unhappy with their contracts or current teams, we might still see a few more moves and trades before the start of Week 1. But there's certainly a handful of players that we expect to see in a new uniform before the first snap of the season.
Jimmy G is going to start Week 1. The Niners need him to be listed as a starting quarterback to keep his trade value somewhat alive.
The majority of offseason trades have already taken place, but that doesn't mean that all 32 NFL teams are done wheeling and dealing. Here are 9 NFL stars who could still be traded, along with their ideal landing spots. Jimmy Garoppolo. Kyle Shanahan has stated several times now that Garoppolo will be the San Francisco 49ers Week 1 starter. But at the end of the day, the coach's job is to put his team in the best position to win. We know who Garoppolo is at this point. Slightly above average, nothing spectacular, and unfortunately, injury-prone. With rookie Trey Lance, the sky's the limit, and the kid turned a lot of heads during training camp. Lance simply gives San Fran the best chance to win a Super Bowl in 2021. And with several teams in need of starting quarterbacks, 49ers GM John Lynch should be auctioning off Garoppolo's services. The Washington football team would make plenty of sense here. Are they really sold on Ryan Fitzpatrick or Kyle Allen or Taylor Heineke? All Washington needs is a game manager who can avoid turnovers, and that's where Garoppolo comes into play. Washington, like the 2019 49ers that went to Super Bowl 54, is largely built around a fierce front seven and strong rushing offense. Their quarterback doesn't need to throw for 300 yards a game in order to win. Michael Thomas. The relationship between Thomas and the New Orleans Saints organization has soured over the past year. In 2020, Thomas was suspended 1 game for pushing teammate CJ Gardner-Johnson in practice. Injuries and drama derailed Thomas's season as he was limited to 40 catches for 438 yards and 0 scores in 7 games. With Drew Brees now retired, the Saints aren't really in win-now mode, but rather in a retooling period. And that's why it makes sense to deal Thomas. I mean, his social media activity suggests that he'd like a fresh start, and he's also slated to miss some time after undergoing off-season surgery. But despite his hefty contract and injury history, the 2019 Offensive Player of the Year should garner plenty of interest via the trade market. The New England Patriots come to mind as the perfect landing spot. They still need a true number 1 wideout. Belichick has a long and successful history of bringing in disgruntled veteran receivers that carried some baggage. Randy Moss, anybody? Other playoff contending teams such as the Baltimore Ravens, Indianapolis Colts, and Washington Football Team could also use Thomas. He would add another element to any offense he's in. But it's really the Patriots who check off all the boxes. This would be a typical Belichick move. Odell Beckham Jr. OBJ's production in Cleveland has been solid, but not exactly as dominant compared to his days with the New York Giants. In the Big Apple, he averaged 92.8 receiving yards per game. In Cleveland, that number has dropped to a mere 58.9 yards per game. Beckham suffered an ACL tear and had to miss most of the 2020 season, but the Browns' offense didn't miss a beat, thanks to their dominant ground game. The Browns don't need OBJ to win, and his high salary should add more incentive for GM Andrew Berry to deal him. Baker Mayfield's extension is looming, and Myles Garrett's mega extension kicks in next year. The 49ers seem like the ideal spot for Beckham. Even if Brandon Ayuk takes off in year 2, it doesn't hurt to have an explosive playmaker like OBJ in the fold as well. Could you imagine adding Beckham to Shanahan's offense alongside Ayuk, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel with a dual-threat QB like Trey Lance and one of the league's most dangerous rushing attacks? OBJ is the type of player that could help the 49ers get over the top. But even the Colts should be eyeing a trade for Beckham. And of course, the Patriots should as well. Or might the Saints be enticed to offer a Thomas for OBJ swap if the two teams can make the money work? Or if the Green Bay Packers try to add another weapon for Aaron Rodgers? Maybe John Gruden and the Las Vegas Raiders want to make a big splash. Honestly, the possibilities for an Odell Beckham trade are truly endless. Jaylon Smith. The Dallas Cowboys are up against the cap, and sooner or later, one of their young standout linebackers will have to go. After the Cowboys drafted Micah Parsons 12th overall, it put Smith and Leighton Vander Esch on the trade block. The former, who signed a 5-year extension worth $64 million in 2019, saw his production drop noticeably in 2020. Vander Esch has been limited to 19 games over the last 2 years, but he's in the last year of his rookie deal, whereas Smith is signed through 2025. Dallas probably doesn't need all 3 linebackers. May as well roll with Vander Esch and Parsons for now and trade Smith. This would also open up valuable cap room in case they want to make a giant splash ahead of the trade deadline. The Atlanta Falcons seem like the ideal landing spot for Smith. There's a major need at linebacker there. Arthur Smith's club is lacking big-time playmakers on defense, and the 2019 Pro Bowler should help their leaky run defense and pass rush. The Raiders, Tennessee Titans, Buffalo Bills, and Miami Dolphins are other contenders who could use a playmaking linebacker like Smith. James Washington. Washington is seeking a fresh start according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. It's understandable. Washington flourished as Pittsburgh's leading receiver in 2019, but Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool became the Steelers' go-to receivers in 2021. And the arrival of do-it-all running back Najee Harris probably takes even more targets away from Washington. Quite frankly, the Steelers don't need Washington with those other 4 young studs on the roster. Washington, who showed promise with the 44 catches for 735 yards in 2019, would be a stellar number 2 wideout on the right team. The Philadelphia Eagles need depth behind Devonta Smith, and it's on the front office to give Jalen Hurts the best supporting cast possible. Washington would give Philly another deep threat on the outside, and it would help shift some of the defense's attention away from Smith. This feels like a perfect match, at least on paper. Washington would also be a nice fit in Green Bay. Or how about the Detroit Lions, who desperately need some pass catchers? And the Chicago Bears could use a sidekick for Allen Robinson too. If the Saints dealt Thomas, they could be in the market for James Washington's services. And we've already outlined all the reasons why Belichick and the Pats might be interested in adding a wideout. But another team to keep an eye on is the Los Angeles Chargers, who could consider adding another weapon to complement Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Truthfully, just a lot of enticing landing spots here. Brandin Cooks. Cooks has been traded 3 times in his career. Kinda surprising considering that he has 5 1,000-yard seasons on his resume. Now, Cooks hasn't been brought up in trade rumors. The Houston Texans might be hesitant about trading their top receiver, especially after moving on from Kenny Stills and Will Fuller V. But this football team was a train wreck with Fuller, Deshaun Watson, and J.J. Watt in 2020. So you can only imagine how terrible they'll be in 2021 without those guys. At this point, they may as well sell off any useful veterans they still have on their roster and compile some draft picks. Cooks going back to New Orleans makes all the sense in the world if they lose Thomas. Cooks would automatically take over as the top receiver on a pretty thin depth chart, and surely he'd be happier on a playoff contender than on an awful Houston team. The Saints should bring back Cooks, who has proven before that he can produce in Sean Payton's offense. Nick Foles. Andy Dalton will open as the starter. If he doesn't pan out, the Bears will give the keys to rookie Justin Fields. And that makes the Super Bowl 52 MVP more than expendable. Foles would be a fine insurance plan for any team with a questionable quarterback situation. The Colts make the most sense for obvious reasons, as Wentz is already dealing with injury issues and head coach Frank Reich was the Eagles' offensive coordinator when Foles earned Super Bowl MVP honors in 2017. Foles didn't pan out in Jacksonville and was meh in Chicago. But if you put him back in Reich's offense with arguably the league's best offensive line, and you'd have to think he could regain some of that magic he showed down in Philly. Otherwise, I wonder if the Eagles are interested in another reunion with Foles. Or what about the Saints if they're not fully sold on Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill? There really should be a market for Foles, but him reuniting with Reich in Indianapolis just makes too much sense not to happen. Stephon Gilmore. It's well known by now that the 2019 Defensive Player of the Year isn't too pleased with his contract situation. But we all know Bill Belichick's philosophy. Better to get rid of a player a year too early rather than a year too late. Belichick can easily find a suitable replacement for Gilmore. This secondary is already deep as is with underrated star J.C. Jackson, newcomer Jalen Mills, and veteran safety Devin McCourty. The Seattle Seahawks are an ideal landing spot for Gilmore. Their pass defense was atrocious last year, and it could be even worse in 2021 after losing top corner Shaquille Griffin to Jacksonville in free agency. The Seahawks have a successful history history of picking up aging veterans and getting the most out of them, and adding Gilmore seems like a no-brainer when you consider that they have to deal with the likes of DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Brandon Ayuk within their division. Of course, Green Bay could use a stud corner to complement Jair Alexander as well. Or how about the Raiders? They sure could use a veteran presence to help out all those young, underachieving prospects they have in their secondary. Chandler Jones. Like Gilmore, Jones is notably unhappy with his contract. It doesn't seem like the Cardinals are keen on moving out the three-time Pro Bowler, but things can always change. Arizona would be better off dealing Jones now and getting something in return rather than lose him for nothing in free agency, assuming they're not keen on extending him long-term. This is a guy who could net you at least a second or third round pick, and so many teams could use the services of the 2017 sacks leader. Like, how about the Miami Dolphins? Jones has a history with head coach Brian Flores, who was on the Patriots coaching staff during Jones's first 4 seasons in Foxborough. And Miami needs more pass rushing help. A vet like Jones would be an ideal mentor for rookie first-round pick Jalen Phillips. The Bills also need pass rushing help, especially if they want to contend with the Chiefs. And speaking of teams in desperate need of pass rushing help, the Titans finished 30th in the NFL last season with a measly 19 sacks. But the Dolphins are by far the best fit for Jones in a potential trade. That is, of course, if Arizona ultimately decides to deal him. But what other NFL stars could get traded before Week 1? Join us in the comments section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.